History of slavery. Transatlantic slave trade was eventually curtailed after European and American governments passed legislation abolishing their nation's involvement in it. Practical efforts to enforce the abolition of slavery included the British Preventative Squadron and the American African Slave Trade Patrol, the abolition of slavery in the Americas, and the widespread imposition of European political control in Africa. In modern times, human trafficking remains an international problem. An estimated 25 to 40 million people were enslaved as of 2013, the majority of these in Asia. During the 1983 to 2005 Second Sudanese Civil War, people were taken into slavery. Evidence emerged in the late 1990s of systematic child slavery and trafficking on cacao plantations in West Africa. Slavery in the 21st century continues and generates an estimated $150 billion in annual profits. Populations in regions with armed conflict are especially vulnerable, and modern transportation has made human trafficking easier. In 2019, there were an estimated 40 million people worldwide subject to some form of slavery, 25% were children. 61% are used for forced labor, mostly in the private sector. 38% live in forced marriages. Other types of modern slavery are prison labor, sex trafficking, and sexual slavery. Prehistoric and ancient slavery. Evidence of slavery predates written records. The practice has existed in many cultures, and can be traced back 11,000 years ago due to the conditions created by the invention of agriculture during the Neolithic Revolution. Economic surpluses and high population densities were conditions that made mass slavery viable. Slavery occurred in civilizations including ancient Egypt, ancient China, the Akkadian Empire, Assyria, Babylonia, Persia, ancient Israel, ancient Greece, ancient India, the Roman Empire, the Arab Islamic Caliphate and Sultanate, Nubia and the pre-Columbian civilizations of the Americas. Ancient slavery consists of a mixture of debt slavery, punishment for crime, prisoners of war, child abandonment, and children born to slaves. Africa. By Hausas in northern Nigeria and Cameroon was half-slave in the 19th century. It is estimated that up to 90% of the population of Arab Swahili Zanzibar was enslaved. Roughly half the population of Madagascar was enslaved, page needed. Slavery in Ethiopia persisted until 1942. The Anti-Slavery Society estimated that there were 2 million enslaved people in the early 1930s, out of an estimated population of between 8 and 16 million. It was finally abolished by order of Emperor Haile Selassie on August 26, 1942. When British rule was first imposed on the Sokoto Caliphate and the surrounding areas in northern Nigeria at the turn of the 20th century, approximately 2 million to 2.5 million people living there were enslaved. Slavery in northern Nigeria was finally outlawed in 1936. Writing in 1998 about the extent of trade coming through and from Africa, the Congolese journalist Eli Kiambakalo wrote, "The African continent was bled of its human resources via all possible routes. Across the Sahara, through the Red Sea, from the Indian Ocean ports and across the Atlantic. At least 10 centuries of slavery for the benefit of the Muslim countries, from the 9th to the 19th. He continues, 4 million slaves exported via the Red Sea, another 4 million through the Swahili ports of the Indian Ocean, perhaps as many as 9 million along the Trans-Saharan caravan route, and 11 to 20 million, depending on the author, across the Atlantic Ocean. Sub-Saharan Africa. Caribbean ports would take on sugar, indigo, raw cotton, and later coffee, and make for Liverpool, Nantes, Lisbon, or Amsterdam. Ships leaving European ports for West Africa would carry printed cotton textiles, some originally from India, copper utensils and bangles, pewter plates and pots, iron bars more valued than gold, hats, trinkets, gunpowder and firearms and alcohol. Tropical shipworms were eliminated in the cold Atlantic waters, and at each unloading, a profit was made, citation needed. The Atlantic slave trade peaked in the late 18th century when the largest number of people were captured and enslaved on raiding expeditions into the interior of West Africa. These expeditions were typically carried out by African states, such as the Bono State, Oyo Empire, Yoruba, Kong Empire, Kingdom of Benin, Imamate of Futa Jalan, Imamate of Futa Toro, Kingdom of Koya, Kingdom of Kasso, Kingdom of Kabu, Fanti Confederacy, Ashanti Confederacy, Aro Confederacy and the Kingdom of Dahomey. Europeans rarely entered the interior of Africa, due to fear of disease and moreover fierce African resistance. The enslaved people were brought to coastal outposts where they were traded for goods. The people captured on these expeditions were shipped by European traders to the colonies of the New World. It is estimated that over the centuries, 12 to 20 million enslaved people were shipped from Africa by European traders, of whom some 15% died during the terrible voyage, many during the arduous journey through the Middle Passage. The great majority were shipped to the Americas, but some also went to Europe and southern Africa. 21 were unchained, as now safe, however all ran away at once, but 8 with many others still in chains, died in 3 days after the crossing. They described their only pain in the heart, and placed the hand correctly on the spot, though many think the organ stands high up in the breastbone.